Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay. Okay. I'll start then, guys. Right. Welcome to. I've got a blurb that I need to read out that Alison has kindly provided for me. So that's why I'll be sounding a little bit robotic for a couple of seconds. So welcome to the People Policy Development Committee, which is being held under the local authorities Coronavirus Meeting Wales Regulations 2020. I'd like to manage expectations from the outset and highlight that there may be some glitches in the meeting. However, please be assured that we will learn from them and keep striving towards a seamless process. I'm also conscious that a number of the participants may have issues with bandwidth and would suggest they turn off the video should that become an issue. This meeting is being broadcast live so that members of the public and others may view it. Please ensure that you all mute your microphones and remember to unmute them when you are called to speak. The Democratic Services Officer will call out the names of all taking part in the meeting so that you can confirm your attendance. So I think, Alison, you're going to do that now?
Yes, please, Chair. Okay, so Councillor Kerry Evans.
Present.
Councillor Cyril Anderson. Doesn't seem to be with us at the moment, so I'll move on. Councillor Steve Gallagher.
Yes, me, I'm here.
Councillor Paxton Hood-Williams.
I'm present as well.
Councillor Yvonne Jardine.
I'm present.
Councillor Erica Kirshner. Doesn't seem to be with us at the moment. Councillor Mike Lewis. Councillor Mo Sykes. Councillor Gloria Tanner's just given her apologies. And Councillor Mike White.
Yes, Chair, I'm here.
Thank you. And do the officers just want to introduce themselves? Dave, do you want to go first?
Yeah, Dave Howes, Director of Social Services.
Jane?
Jane Whitmore, Strategic Lead Commissioner, Social Services.
And Lisa?
Hi,
We've got two Lisa, sorry. Lisa Banks.
Oh, sorry. My name's Lisa Banks. I'm a Planning Officer in Adult Social Services.
And Lisa Thomas.
Lisa Thomas, Lead Solicitor for Social Services.
And I'm Alison Lowe, Democratic Services Officer. And I think Councillor Mike Lewis has just joined us. Councillor Lewis?
Yeah, Simon Jones, also Corporate Strategic Delivery Unit.
Sorry, Simon, and Simon Jones. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, Alison, I had trouble getting in.
No worries.
Okay, thanks, Alison. Okay, we crack on. It's like an episode of Celebrity Squares here, for those of you who can remember that. Anyway, okay. First agenda item, disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests. Anybody got any? I haven't. No? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Okay, agenda item 3 then are the minutes from the previous meeting, which was back in March. Or was it February, actually? I'm gonna. Anyway, are we happy to move those minutes?
Yes.
Yeah, Stephen, move them. Somebody second that.
Well, I'll second them.
There we are, Paxton second then, please. That's great. Okay, and then we're on to the agenda item 4, which is strategic approach to commissioning models, new models of care and support, and progress to date on the Foundation Economy Challenge Fund project. And this is a verbal update, and obviously, I'm sure we all understand that both the main agenda items that we're discussing today have been heavily impacted by the pandemic and the lockdown, hence the verbal updates today. But I'll hand over to Jane to lead on this, Jane Whitmore. I'll hand over to you, Jane.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I'll start off in terms of just a bit of the context of where we are, and then I'll ask Lisa to come in to give us the progress to date and where we're going to go next with this piece of work. So if you remember that we had a workshop back in January and to really look at the foundational economy piece of work, because we were successful in a bid for the Foundation Economy Challenge Fund from Welsh Government. Looking in terms of alternative approaches to addressing the problems and realising potential in the foundational economy. And the bid was to look at creating agents of change of the resources to support the creation of cooperations or social or micro enterprises. And we were looking at to understand what that look of provision of care and support would look like in some of the areas that are harder to, engage or to put that provision in place. So that the proposal was then changing the nature of care and support delivery at a local level and putting people who have care and support needs in control of the design and delivery of and connect them with individuals in their local communities. And looking at that for that flexible and responsive approach. So we're looking to support the development of the workforce and workers to create their own employment arrangements. So making sure that there's support in place for them, making sure that it is safe and that there is some sort of control and understanding over their day-to-day workload and the conditions of employment. And the best hope would be that we'd create a genuine different approach to commissioning of care for people with low level needs in the community. So we looked at this in our workshop back on
Is Jane frozen for everyone?
Yeah.
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 Yes. Yeah.
Just give her a second.
If she doesn't come back in, then we'll call on you, Lisa, if that's okay.
Perhaps she's pretending.
She could do.
That's unkind.
See if she blinks.
See if I can get her back in. Hang on.
Okay. It's classic, really, isn't it?
She was in full flow then as well.
She was.
Yeah, she was.
to January to.
Oh, sorry,
really-
Jane, you froze.
Oh,
Fro-
sorry.
About 25 seconds ago.
About 25 seconds ago. Oh, actually, can you hear me now? Sorry. Yeah, sorry. So just picking up, sorry, I'm reading off a screen and I can't see. That's the problem, isn't it? So really picking up about from our workshop of all of the things that we were worried about that we'd want to address going forward, and the wider involvement of our communities and community councils and our third sector and different partners to actually build this approach. So really, really very early days, but really good to have that input at the earliest planning stage. So it is a pilot that we've had a little bit of funding to test this out and to test the water. So it was good as a starter, but of course that has paused in terms of the situation with COVID, but work still has gone on and we are still sort of ploughing ahead with what that project would look like. So if I stop now and pass over to Lisa, because we did meet from Friday as a project team and to have a look at what our next steps and where would we go with this. So we've got a bit of an update there to go on of what the current status is. So if I pass over to you, Lisa, is that okay? Thanks. I'll mute my microphone now. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So we pretty much came to a standstill back at the end of February, early March, as all our efforts were put into the emergency response. One of the partners that we were working with, however, Wales Cooperative Centre, had some capacity to continue some of that work for us. So we entered into an interim agreement with them to do some sort of preparatory work, so we didn't lose all of the momentum, and that when we were ready to pick the project back up, we wouldn't be starting from scratch pretty much. So the officer from Wales Cooperative Centre has been working with our local area coordinators, has been working with SCVS, the volunteer coordinators. They've been talking to key individuals within the areas that we've targeted to start to have those conversations and to lay the ground. So now that we are ready to pick things back up again, some of that work has already taken place. So we're not in as difficult a position as we thought we were going to be. And so the project board did meet last Friday, and we kind of presented a kind of slightly revised plan in terms of what was possible, because a number of things we've been delayed, but Welsh Government are really clear that the end date for the project is still the 31st of March 21, which means we now have less time to deliver it, and the conditions in terms of trying to implement the project are complicated with social distancing. So we have a shorter time period, and we have difficulties in terms of connecting and communicating with people that may delay the project. So we're kind of up against it, really. So we were kind of suggesting that we reduce our target, we keep the outcomes the same, but we just reduce the targets, because we don't feel that the original targets are possible now. So Welsh Government are asking for an update, which we're putting together at the moment, which will kind of just try and express some of those things. What they have said, Welsh Government as well, is in mitigation in terms of the timescale, because they're not able to kind of be flexible on that they have put a number of things in place. So they put in a community of practice across Wales with like-minded projects, where if we come together as projects, we may be able to overcome some of the blocks and difficulties by working together. And they've also put together an expert procurement panel made up of officers within Welsh Government who are there to help unblock any blockages that the different projects may come across. So I know, for instance, colleagues in Flintshire are really struggling with regulations with CIW, so they will help facilitate those conversations that need to take place. And similarly, if we come across similar issues. So they have put things in there to try and mitigate that shortened timescale. But they're really interested, Welsh Government, particularly in what the COVID-19 experience has kind of exposed in terms of highlighting the importance of the foundational economy and highlighting the importance of key workers and those essential goods and services that keep society ticking over when actually all else has kind of fallen away. So there's a massive focus on the foundation economy project now in that context as well, and they're really interested in seeing how we can build on the experience of COVID-19, how communities have responded, and how we ensure that those essential, in our instance it's social care, how we can build on what we've learned through that experience. So so actually as a project, there seems almost more opportunity now than there was previously. We've recruited to the project. We're in the process of recruiting. We have one person in place covering the Clydach area, and she starts today actually, and she's starting to make contact and develop her relationships in that area. She's starting to look at toolkits that will help her in the conversations that she will have with people who may be interested in being part of the project. And we're currently, the adverts are out for currently the post in Gower, and a post that is going to help people come together who may want to choose the direct payment and combine those their resources to purchase their services together. So we should have all the individuals in post sort of mid to late August, but there's flexibility built in the sense that the person who's already in post is going to be covering across the two areas, just to make sure things are happening in both of those areas. So we've also had conversations with key individuals within the local authority who are going to be part of the project, so our domiciliary care officers and our direct payment officers, and we're kind of trying to understand what impact COVID-19 has had in terms of the issue with waiting lists, and that picture has changed, and we kind of need to understand that, and also and how sorry, I've actually come to a full stop now. I've lost my train of thought. So yeah, we're sort of so I suppose in summary, we're kind of getting into the beginnings of the projects and starting to just put together a project plan, and that's kind of emerging as we speak. We've already had an interest from an individual in Gower who is interested in setting up a micro enterprise, and that is being chased up. So I feel we've gone from sort of nothing happening at all to gradually the project starting to take shape, and yeah, and we're good to go, really. Is that okay?
Well, that's fine. That's great, Lisa. Thanks very much. Dave has indicated, Dave Howes indicated he'd like to speak. So Dave, you can now.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. That's really really helpful update from Jane and Lisa. I suppose there's a general bit for me, Chair, just building on some of your introductory comments, and then just building on that those last points from Lisa. Clearly for us, along with everybody else, COVID has changed the game, completely. It's completely revised our thinking about some of the ways that we need to offer our services, our approach to care and support for individuals, the extent to which we need, potentially a different relationship with our communities and individuals within those communities. And part of what we're having to do as we start to develop, the council and then us within the directorate develop our recovery or modification or adaptation plans, however you want to describe that, is revisit, essentially what do we think were the priorities pre having an understanding or any understanding of this national health epidemic and public health crisis. What might our priorities be going forward now, and where does the stuff that we thought was definitely important before fit with that recovery and adaptation planning, perhaps over the next 12 to 18 months, when we're absolutely convinced we will have to be living with COVID and risk of transmission within our communities, perhaps longer, when we get to understand, exactly what are we faced with going forward. So I guess the lens through which I'm exploring some of those things, and the things I'd encourage the committee to do, is to be thinking about, does it seem to fit? Should this still be a priority? And I think both Jane and Lisa's descriptions, very much for me, reinforce, yes, this was important as an area that we should be exploring pre-COVID. I think, as Lisa just touched on there, this becomes an even more important piece of work, set within the context of what might our new relationship with communities and individuals be. And I suspect this will become part of, or need to become part of, a much bigger programme around strengths and asset-based practice, and the way we hang on, try and hang on to some of that really fantastic stuff that has emerged out of this terrible crisis around the way communities and individuals and volunteers and partners, etc., have responded. And I very much see this piece of work as part of helping us to understand that bigger picture and helping us to develop fit for purpose modification plans. I don't know whether you're going to, whether conversations are sufficiently advanced, Chair, and whether you'll be talking today about what the future of this committee might look like. I'm guessing it's going to be, along with everything else, reframed in terms of recovery and adaptation. Certainly this piece of work that the committee's taken forward to date is a really valuable bit, and any of the learning that we've had to date and any of the learning that emerges in the way that Jane and Lisa described, I think it's going to be absolutely crucial. So this, from my perspective, this is definitely going to be on the list, probably as part of an expanded strategy or approach, if we're all lined up behind that. But certainly as director, I'm going to be advocating that approach. And we know that, Amy, one of the new head service in adult services, that's, a particular area of expertise. And it's no coincidence that at this point, the council has opted for somebody with that type of expertise and experience, to help drive and lead our recovery and adaptation planning. So big thank you from me to Jane, Lisa, and the others that they've been working with, even in these most difficult of circumstances. I think this is a really good and important piece of work in developing our preferred future. So I'll shut up now, Chair.
Thanks, Dave. That's great. I'll comment on what you mentioned about the future of the committee in a little while. But Paxton's indicated that he'd like to speak. So Paxton, if you come in now, please.
Yes, I think, thank you, Chairman, I have to come back in on this now and talking about working with communities and what have you. Basically, Fairwood Ward that I represent is two basic villages, Three Crosses and Upper Clay. And certainly in Three Crosses initially, we were very quick to get out around with a leaflet to every household, asking people if they wanted to volunteer to support people and asking people to identify themselves if they wanted assistance. At the end of the day, we finished up with about 70 volunteers and about 12 people wanting assistance. So we had certainly worked very well in that sense, and we will be obviously looking at that in future and seeing what lessons we can learn, and we'll do a debrief for ourselves on that. And obviously it's something that we can bring back to this. And Upper Clay was slightly different because Catherine Hay, I think it was the local area coordinator who was put into Calais and Dunvant and Upper Clay effectively. She got in ahead of us a little bit of the game with the community council there, although the community council did get involved afterwards. And certainly we've had that contact as well. So certainly in those communities have done a lot of work within themselves to help one another. And I know the same thing has happened down in North Gower with Mark Thomas, and in other areas of Gower as well, across Gower itself. So where there's been community councillors, there has been that ability to involve those councillors in terms of working within their communities to make sure that people are supporting one another. And obviously it's very important. Now you say at this point in time that Welsh Government is currently setting the deadline, or it's not moving the deadline because they need to have things in place. That's obviously going to make things a bit more difficult. I know we were looking at things like the Somerset scene and what have you, which we're not going to have time to look at now, I guess. But obviously you're well down the road where we're going, and it's going to be interesting to see where it goes from here. All I can say, Chairman, I don't know what it's like so much in the urban areas, but we have a couple of members here from the urban areas, and perhaps they can explain what was happening there as well.
Thanks, Paxton. Yeah, I mean, on that final point there, I mean, obviously I represent Morriston in Swansea East, and the picture that you're describing is pretty much the picture that unfurled across Swansea really, and from Clydach in the north, as it were, to yourselves down in the Gower. There's been a huge amount of work done as communities come together, and the local area coordinators deserve a lot of recognition, I think, in this respect, alongside all those other community actors as well. So Jane and Lisa mentioned SEVS. I know personally as the ward councillor for Morriston, SEVS were fantastic in supporting us to identify and support volunteers, and supporting the local food bank, which is run by another third sector provider as well, or voluntary sector provider as well. So yeah, so across the piece, I mean, certainly that's my experience, Paxton, that has happened pretty much everywhere in Swansea, which really supports what Lisa, Jane and Dave have said today, I think, in terms of where we're going with this, which brings me to Dave's point really about the future of the PDCs and their role in supporting and delivering on the recovery plan. So I mean, I'm not in cabinet, so I can't tell you exactly or where we are with that, but I know that the overall intention is that the PDCs will be supportive of the recovery, supporting officers with the recovery plan as we go forward. And as Dave mentioned, this particular piece of work seems really pertinent in the climate that we're in and the learning we've already had. So I would support everything you've just said, Paxton, really. And in terms of that project, the pilot project Lisa was outlining, it's obviously really disappointing from a project point of view that that you've got so many challenges given the timescales and everything else. But I think what it would be good that whatever the work plan looks like with the PDCs as we move to that recovery plan era, it would be good if we could maybe have some consistent feedback on how the project has gone from either Jane or Lisa. I think that if you could keep that on the work plan moving forward, that's my own view. I don't know what the other members on the committee think about that, but certainly that's what I would prefer. But I'll open it up to the other members to come in and see if you sort of agree with that idea or proposal. Lisa, you've indicated. Do you want to come in now? Is she speaking? You're on mute, Lisa.
Sorry. One of the things I forgot to highlight was in terms of opportunities for the project presented by COVID, as well as the community response, and understanding who vulnerable people are within the community, and the community coming together to support them. That's a really good foundation for this project. But the other element that is really important is the number of people who are either furloughed currently and who may have volunteered during this crisis and who may be considering a new career, or people who actually are furloughed and may not end up with a job at the end of that period, who may well be. So actually, you know, within those communities, we know now that there are individuals who have already expressed that interest in a new career, who may find themselves without a job, and who are kind of, so there are opportunities that probably weren't there before. And yeah, so I just wanted to make that point. The other thing, just picking up on what you said as well, was that we're gonna evaluate the project as we go along using a kind of learning tool. So every sort of 2 weeks or monthly, we're going to be, you know, as well as the targets that we've set ourselves to achieve, just understand what it is that we're learning as we go along, because we feel that that is as important as the end result in a way, and what are the issues that we're finding, what are the things that we need to be thinking about in that broader sense that Dave was probably kind of referring to. So that's something that we will be doing as well. Okay, thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, that's fantastic. Anyone else want to come in and comment at this point? No. Okay. That's great. Thanks, Jane and Lisa, for coming in and speaking on that. And I think that going forward with whatever the work plan looks like as we move forward, I think we'll be seeing more of you, hopefully. And we'll all be fascinated to know how that project is going on, how the evaluation is going around that. So that's great. So thank you very much both for coming in today. And if there's no other comments on that, then we'll move on to the next agenda item. Okay. Thanks both. Can I have a cup of tea if you like? Okay. Okay. The next agenda item 5, is transition for children and young people with disability. And Dave Howes is going to lead on this. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Apologies from Chris, who's been leading on and working with committee and Simon in relation to this particular area. Here is an absolute tangible example of the impact of COVID and our reprioritisation of some of our work. I know the committee had back at its last meeting, quite a comprehensive report setting out this is how we could consider taking forward the work of the committee to date. Gathered all of the thinking around how we might want transition arrangements to look going forward, all the different stakeholders would need to be engaged and involved in that work. Next step was going to be around implementation planning, and all of that got put on hold. Nothing has progressed in relation to that particular piece of work, unless by coincidence that there were specific issues that we needed to pick up linked to COVID and this particular cohort that we then had to troubleshoot, but not as part of a piece of strategic work that was essentially the next steps the committee were looking for. So just to first of all, giving that update, Chris clearly is one of our lead officers who is particularly tied up with lots of stuff in relation to children's services, and a bit different from adult services. Children's services just ramping up now as we start to see lockdown easing and more children returning to school. And you will all have seen young people out and about and things starting to open up, particularly for young people. That is pushing up our workload in children's services particularly, and Chris is right at the heart of that. So that's one of the reasons that I said, look, I'll come and talk to the committee about next steps in relation to this area of work. A bit like I said before, this doesn't get any less important. This particular cohort that we were talking about, the kinds of improvements that we need to be making to systems, but systems and processes and policies, etc. It's not become less important. It still needs to be a part of our recovery and adaptation, adaptive planning, but it might have some implications for the timing and nature of changes that we make. And in particular, part of the debate that I've been having in a regional context is, look, we've been doing some work locally. We've also been doing related, slightly different angle work in the region. We haven't got time to, nor will it be helpful to have separate work streams looking at, related areas of practice. It's probably a third area of practice, or definitely is a third area of practice, or third area of system change and transformation linked to ALN in education. It's all interrelated. So really what my suggestion is going to be to the committee and to form part of recovery and adaptive and modification planning going forward is that we link this with the regional piece of work. The value in doing that is clearly we are automatically then linked in with health boards and health services. So if we can make this a priority within the region and the regional recovery modification planning, that cuts through some barriers for us locally. I've had that discussion with education colleagues locally as well, because whilst education are linked in with some of the regional work, it's a bit peripheral at the moment. So they are linked to the children's programme, for obvious reasons, not as closely linked to the adults programme, which tends to dominate in the region for understandable reasons. And this is a crossover, obviously, given that it's transition. That means some difference for the way we organise ourselves in terms of support for adults, just the same as it does for supports for children and young people. So I've had some initial agreement around that. That is a sensible approach. That doesn't mean it's all bottomed out yet, because there's lots of discussions that are having to take place around what work are we prioritising and when, because as you can imagine, just as we've already talked about, there's a heck of a lot of thinking and planning having to go on as we're starting to open up services. I suppose I'm also mindful a bit of that first item as well, that our thinking around what we might prioritise in terms of support to this cohort of the population as they transition from children's services into adult services and all those people might be impacted, and probably should be impacted, on our approach to communities again and how we're supporting individuals generally. So it's, I suppose at this stage, it's that would be the direction of travel that I would be recommended if the committee are minded to support that. That will make sure that all of the work that you have done to date doesn't get lost in what might be a very changed programme that the committee might be overseeing. As you've said, Chair, we're not quite sure what exactly might be asked of the committee. We know broadly that it's probably going to be in that context. We don't know quite how big or small the ask might be. We definitely don't want to lose the work to date, and if we can locate it within that regional programme, then it will have priority. It'll mean that we'll engage, more easily one of the absolutely big and crucial partners within this work, and certainly we've got a local commitment from education colleagues that they can see the value in that, and that they are happy to join more obviously that particular regional work stream if we can get it up and running. Caveat has to be, if for some reason, I can't foresee it, but if for some reason it drops down the pecking order of the of the regional programme, well, we'll have to revisit locally then. Does that make sense to us? It probably wouldn't, given that we've given it such a high priority to date, and it's a particular cohort that we're would be looking to make differences to. Well, we can bring it back into our local arrangements then if we're concerned it's going to get delayed or get lost. So that's my suggestion, Chair. If you and the committee are happy with that as an approach.
Thank you, Dave. Mike White has indicated he'd like to speak. Mike.
Dave, it's just a query, really. Do you think, because of all the agencies that have come together due to COVID, that the Welsh Government would probably be looking at a task force working group to sort of pool all the knowledge and expertise together? Do you think that could be a solution that the Welsh Government could be looking at with local authorities?
I don't know about a task force, but there certainly are specific Welsh Government initiatives at the moment, all about the learning that there's already been to date around COVID. What implications does that have for future system design? So, you know, for instance, at the moment, I referenced this in scrutiny earlier in the week. One of the early areas that Welsh Government are saying, well, we need, you know, rapid learning in relation to is the approach to care homes and the care home sector and the workforce around care homes. So that's already started. That's what they are describing as a rapid learning exercise facilitated by Professor John Bolton. We've already started being interviewed locally and regionally, some of the learning out. So I think that approach that you're describing is very much the approach that people will be interested in. I suppose what I think we've been very good at locally and regionally is that we've been very proactive. So even if that stuff is going on at a national level, I don't think we should, you know, lapse into, you know, any suggestion around kind of passive, or we'll wait to hear the learning. I think if there's learning for us, if there's a reprioritization of what we think is important locally and as a region and as a population, I think we should be busy cracking on with that and then feed that into any national efforts as well. But the point's well made, Mike. All of that sort of thing will be going on, but let's make sure we're right at, you know, front and centre in that approach as well.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Anybody else like to comment on anything Dave has said before I add mine?
Can I just have a quick word with Dave? Hi, Dave. My concern is that it's been mooted about there's going to be a second wave, and the second wave could be far more worse than the first wave. Is there anything we've been a little bit weak on, although we've been great as a council and we've coped with the first wave? If the second wave is going to be a little bit worse, is there anything we could have done better, or we might look at doing in a different way to be ready for any eventuality that might occur later on in the year?
Absolutely, Mike. Absolutely, the focus is, as part of, that's partly why I call it modification planning. I prefer modification planning to recovery planning, because we have to assume that we will be living with COVID, transmission in our communities, at least for the next 12 to 18 months. All of the evidence suggests, and that's absolutely the case. And part of that includes that we have to be planning on the basis that we might have future surges. And as you say, a surge, it could well be that a surge is more significant and potentially, more impactful on our population than the first surge that we experienced. So all of the thinking around what's being generally called recovery planning, but I prefer, certainly in the context of social care, to call modification planning, is based on preparing for that eventuality. And if we just thought, common sense really, when would we be most worried about a further surge? Well, we'd be most worried during those winter months when we struggle anyway, with, normal, flu infection and all the other challenges that we have around health and social care at that point. And that's partly why I talk about prioritization of things. So, fundamentally, top priority is we cannot have a breakdown in our critical care arrangements. So our care homes have to be as resilient as they can be. Our arrangements to support care homes, obviously been a hell of a lot of learning over the past few months about what is the appropriate way to support and manage infection and avoid infection getting into those kind of settings. Loads of lessons around care at home, but one of the big lessons is you predominantly want to build your systems and your supports around supporting people in their own home. We've always believed that. That's always been one of our system design principles, entirely consistent with what Jane and Lisa were talking about around that pilot model, probably even more so because it's supporting people at home, supporting people in their communities, supported by people in their communities who know, well, you know, all of that kind of thinking. Well, we absolutely know that it doesn't eliminate the risk of transmission and then consequences of transmission, but it's a hell of a lot safer to support people in their own homes than it is to try and support them in more institutionalized settings, etc. So all of the thinking, it absolutely is going on with that in mind, and that will shape prioritization both regionally and locally. But at its fundamental level, it will be, we have to be as sure as we can be that whatever is thrown at us in terms of a surge or a super surge, at whatever stage that might happen, that our critical care services and our critical care services linked in with health arrangements, both acute and community health arrangements, are as robust as possible. A whole load of changes have been made already, and they're all presumed to be needed at least for 12 to 18 months. The focus of the scrutiny session on Monday very much was around, starting that conversation around the learning, but then moving to a focus on what does the future look like. I suspect, again, whilst don't absolutely, know, and, the chair hasn't, necessarily had all of those discussions they'll need to have, nor will committee. But I imagine one of the things that you will be asked to do in this committee, given that you are the People's PDC, will also be to have an eye on that, to be contributing to the discussion, to be a further test and challenge of, are we focusing on the right things? Clearly, as your Director of Social Services, fundamentally, that first and foremost responsibility that I would have statutorily is to make sure that our care and support arrangements for, our most vulnerable within the population aren't at any risk of breaking down. Clearly don't have time to go into all the detail. We had a long session on Monday. I would say, absolutely with hand on heart, the work that the council's done, the work that your staff have done in the social care sector, both within the council, within the external sector, and our colleagues and partners in community health and acute health, plus all of our partners in third sector, in other community services, has been absolutely first rate. And that design around what the future could look like, needs to look like, to face all eventualities that we could possibly imagine at the moment, again, has been first rate. You can never say, how can we? It's such a dreadful set of circumstances that we faced, that we know all of the answers, or that we, have a perfect crystal ball as to how it might play out and have planned for everything. But I think we've done a bloody good job of being as well placed as we can be, and that's a credit to staff and colleagues across the council and across the sector.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. It's probably an opportune moment just to say on behalf, I'm sure the other members on the council, on the committee, will support me and just going on record, Dave, and just saying a big thanks to your staff, be it adult or children's services across, and everywhere else, recommissioning as well. It's been unbelievable, the response to this crisis. It's been a privilege to be on the sidelines watching it, as it were, but I think that it needs to go on record, really, that it's been from across the piece, really. And yourselves, Alison, in Democratic Services, it's been a fantastic response. In terms of this particular item, in terms of drawing a line under it, Are we all okay with what Dave is suggesting there in terms of what's really pleasing about our work, I think, in transition across the last 12 months has been that whatever arrangements we come to regionally with our partners, that Swansea's really done a lot of thinking around this. So my daughter's just coming in. A lot of thinking around this, and we're in a good position to go to those negotiations from a position of strength, really, and hopefully leading the way on that. But in terms of drawing a line under this, are we all happy with what Dave is suggesting, that we've come to a point really where this needs to become a regional development issue? But quick query, Dave, is I know we discussed this briefly before the committee last week, whether we need to, and Alison, maybe you can help us with this, maybe we need something, some kind of written report just to explain that, really, to send back to Cabinet so that we can formally draw a line under this.
I think that I don't know whether it's just this chair, or I probably encourage, and I'm looking at Simon perhaps to help you with this, chair, if he's able to summarise the work of the committee today, including the transition stuff, but all of the stuff that you've been working on the past year, as a kind of sit-rep report, setting out where stuff needs to go. It can set out, the general direction as we've described today, which I think will leave the committee well placed to say then, okay, well, whatever the arse might be going forward, we know where we're at with this stuff. We're confident that it doesn't get lost then as part of, bigger recovery or modification plannings. Some of it, that first bit, we probably think will be, front and centre as part of the work of the committee going forward, given that, it might not appear just as this bit, it might be part of a bigger strand of work, but nevertheless, you'll have, you'll have further eyes on that. But that, I think at this stage, that's probably the most helpful way of doing it. And hopefully Simon will be able to assist the committee with that, just so that you have got that position now before potentially you get a much bigger, broader ask that we're not quite sure about, and you haven't had an opportunity to say, yeah, but it looks like this at the moment. So that'd be my advice, Chair, if you and the committee are happy with that.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Everybody okay with that as an approach? Paxton,
yes, definitely.
I'm happy with that.
I didn't quite hear you, Paxton. You're on mute?
Apologies for that, but basically, obviously, we have a new cabinet member in terms of adult social services, in essence, anyway. And presumably you will want to be talking, Kerry, with Clive to see where he wants us to go as well in that sense. But presumably, David, and you've been talking to him, he knows where we are, and he's obviously got a lot to learn in this sense in terms of what's putting in place, taking over from Mark Child. So it'll be interesting to see where he wants to go with it as well, and we need to understand that and use that in terms of determining our work plan going forward, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Paxton. Of course, we've been having those conversations. I think it's probably, that adds a bit of value as well to the to preparing this sit-rep type report, because it's a way again of the committee bringing the cabinet member formally up to date, so that any conversations subsequently are at least taken forward from a position of a shared understanding of what you've achieved to date. So I think again it just adds weight to it. Seems like a sensible approach.
Yeah. Okay. Ta.
Yeah, that's a good point, Paxton. Okay, I think we can accept that as an approach. Simon, if you and I have a chat via email outside this meeting, if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah. Fine.
Okay. Okay, that's great. Thanks very much, everybody, for that. We're on to the last item on the agenda, which is the work plan. And as we've discussed quite a lot in this meeting, there's obviously going to be an evolving picture with that work plan. As we've got a break in August, I believe, Alison, haven't we? We don't have one in August, which is timely, I guess. And then in September, we will come back. Probably that work plan will look very different. And and the point that Paxton was making about the discussions that have been going on between senior officers and cabinet members, and the modification plan or recovery plan, whatever you want to call it, will obviously be driving what our work plan looks like going forward. And that's obviously a slight change in how we would normally do it in how we've done it in the past with the PDC, but sort of obviously doesn't need to be said really. It's unprecedented time. So hopefully we will know a lot more by the time we come back in September, and we'll have a clear understanding of what our work plan will look like and how that's feeding into that overall modification plan for social care in Swansea Council.
Well, presumably, Chairman, the commissioning models and the way we finish up doing this will presumably be carrying on coming back to us anyway. So it'll be an important part, I think, of what we need to be looking at again next year, because that is going to be key, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's a fair point. Okay, has anybody at this point have got anything else they'd like to add on anything before we draw to a close? No? Okay. Thanks to everybody for coming. Thanks to all the officers for attending as well. And I'll see you again soon, sir.
Okay.
All the best, chap.
Best.
Many thanks.
Bye,
Hello.
everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers all.
Ta-ra.
Hello.